Hi everyone, I'm sorry it's taken me a little bit of time to get this video together, so you should be watching this tonight and finishing off your notes so that when you come in tomorrow you can be ready to go ahead with the lab that we're going to be doing, exploring the properties of water. So in class, we've talked about the first two of these properties. We've talked about polarity and we've talked about solubility. So solubility is what we were finishing up right at the end of class yesterday. So let's just go ahead to that slide real quick. You should have put in here that water is the universal solvent. And so for this lecture, I've gone ahead and just used the PowerPoint that has the blanks filled in, so you can get those without any trouble. So the one thing that there were two things that I had you write down when we were talking about solubility. I had you write down the definition of solubility, which was the ability of a substance, which is called the solute, to dissolve in another substance called the solvent. And then what I had you write down is what a hydrophilic substance is versus a hydrophobic substance. So hopefully you wrote down that a hydrophilic substance is a polar substance, and the polarity means that it interacts readily with water or dissolves in it. A hydrophobic substance, on the other hand, is nonpolar, so this would be something like a fat or an oil, and this does not interact well with water. So instead of dissolving in water, it separates from water. Okay, so let's talk about the next property of water, which is cohesion. So you see here the first bullet point here you might want to note is your definition. So the definition of cohesion is the attractive force that holds the molecules of the same substance together. Okay, so here with water, we're talking about all the different water molecules, right? So what we refer to as water is actually billions of molecules of water. So cohesion is what holds each individual water molecule together. Okay, so cohesion is what allows substances to withstand rupture when they're placed under stress because the molecules are held together. So because water molecules are held together with hydrogen bonds, they are held together at what we call the liquid gas interface. So like if you look at this picture of this is a water droplet on a surface, the liquid gas interface would be sort of this barrier between the liquid water and the air, which would be made up of gases. Right, so when we say it can withstand rupture, that means that if you were to very sort of gently touch the water droplet, it wouldn't break. Okay, so this is because of surface tension that is created. Okay, so here it says cohesion is responsible for creating surface tension, a thin skin that results from water molecules sticking together. Okay, so surface tension is what is holding this water droplet together. Surface tension because of cohesion, right? That attractive force holding the molecules together. So surface tension is what allows the spider to walk on the surface of water, right? So we've all seen little insects that are able to walk on water. That's because of surface tension. Now it's very fragile. So for instance, if I took a needle, which is very light, doesn't weigh a lot. If I very gently placed it on, let's say I had a glass of water, I could very gently place it on the surface of the water and it would float. But if I just sort of abruptly went and dropped it and it sort of like broke that surface tension or that skin, it would sink. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to say about that. Just that cohesion and resulting surface tension is why water droplets form and why things can float on water. Okay. All right, let's now talk about adhesion, right? So cohesion is the attractive force that holds molecules of the same substance together. Adhesion is the attractive force that holds molecules of different substances together. So here, this first bullet point, the attractive forces between two different substances, that is your definition for adhesion. So an example here is the attractive force between water molecules and glass. Okay, so glass actually has a charge to it. It has a charged surface. So remember we talked about water attracts different substances that are either polar or ionic substances. So they could be positively charged or negatively charged. So glass would be like one of these ionic substances. It has a charge. So we want to talk about this idea of adhesion, but more specifically capillarity, which is what you have here, which you should put in that blank, capillarity. And this is here the definition for capillarity. So the attraction between molecules that results in the rise of the surface liquid when in contact with a solid. Okay, so adhesion and capillarity is basically, like you can see down here, these are capillary tubes. Adhesive forces sometimes are stronger actually than the water molecules' cohesive forces. So it actually allows water to climb up the sides of these glass tubes rather than just sit there. So these are capillary tubes, which are really skinny pieces or tubes of glass. They might only be like 0.5 millimeter in diameter. And because of adhesion and capillarity, it actually allows water to climb up the insides of this tube. Okay, so the last thing which you see down here, well, together adhesion, cohesion, and capillarity help water rise through narrow tubes against gravity. Okay, so cohesion is what's keeping the water molecules together, but adhesion is making them climb up the side, and then it pulls the water along with it. Right, so you can see here we have a little picture of a plant with its leaves and the roots underground. It turns out that cohesive and adhesive forces are really important for transporting water from roots of plants to their leaves. Okay, so as we have water being evaporated here from the surface of a plant, right, so from the leaf here, because of the forces that are, so adhesion within the stems, right, and cohesion keeping the actual water molecules together, as the water molecules are evaporated from the surface, they actually pull the other water up through the stem and to the roots of the plants. So it's really important, obviously, for plants because without this capillary action, then the plants wouldn't get the water that they need, and they also wouldn't get the minerals that they need because the minerals or nutrients, you might call them, are dissolved in water, and so that's how they're brought into the plant. Okay, the next thing we need to talk about, we have 2 more slides to talk about, is high heat capacity. All right, so here you should put in this blank that water has high heat capacity. Now what you don't have here is a definition of heat capacity. So heat capacity is the ability of a substance to absorb heat energy. And I'm going to say that again. Heat capacity is the ability of a substance to absorb heat energy. So water actually has a high heat capacity due to the hydrogen bonds that form between the individual water molecules. So when heat is absorbed, the hydrogen bonds are broken, and this releases a lot of energy. All right, and it allows water molecules to actually flow freely over one another. That's not really the most important thing for you to know, but you should understand this concept of heat capacity, right? So just being able to absorb heat energy. And it turns out that water actually has the highest specific heat capacity of any liquid that we know of. So what specific heat capacity is the amount of heat energy that it takes to raise the temperature of 1 gram of a substance by 1 degree Celsius. So what this means for water and having a very high heat capacity is that it takes a long time basically to heat and cool water. This is important for different reasons. One example is that the heat capacity of water is about 5 times the heat capacity of sand, right? And that's why land heats and cools a lot faster than oceans do, right? So when it first gets really cold outside, you might go to the ocean and it would still be fairly warm, okay, for a long period of time. So this resistance to change in temperatures very rapidly really makes water a great habitat for a lot of different organisms, right? So most organisms really can't withstand a wide range of temperature changes. So here we have a picture of a fish. So if you think about fish, most fish have a pretty narrow range of tolerance, meaning that they can't live in, they have their temperature that they thrive in, and they can't survive much below that temperature or much above it, right? So the ability of water to sort of buffer these temperature changes because of its heat capacity makes it a pretty stable environment for fish or other aquatic and marine organisms, right? So this also allows for internal body temperatures to be highly regulated because many organisms are mostly composed of water. Okay, so being able to withstand quick changes makes us and other organisms able to regulate our internal body temperatures. Also, due to its high heat capacity, water is used to dispense heat more evenly in warm-bodied animals. Okay, so you can kind of think this like a cooling system in a car, right? Water is used to transport heat from warm places to cool places. So maybe if you're thinking about your body, you could think about it in terms of your extremities. So like your fingers and your toes get cold really easily. Water in your body is able to divert heat to those places to try to keep them warm. Okay, and so make sure I realized also I didn't say this, but you put temperature in this blank here, right? So the high heat capacity allows oceans to help regulate the temperature of the earth enough for life to exist. Okay, our last slide here that we need to talk about, another property of water that's important for living organisms, is the density of ice. So here it says, unlike most solids, water is less dense as a solid. Okay, that's really important. So basically, the way that water's hydrogen bonds are oriented as it freezes makes the individual water molecules actually push away from each other, which makes it less dense. So most other liquids actually pack their molecules more tightly together when they're frozen, right? Which makes them, the frozen version, also known as a solid, makes the solid have a higher density than the liquid. Okay, so if you're looking at this picture, you can see that the warm water floats on top of the cold water because actually these water molecules are more spread out than when they're cold. However, when it freezes, you can see how the hydrogen bonds actually push the water molecules away from each other, right? And so that is what makes there more space between the water molecules, means less dense than at the warmer or colder temperatures. Okay, this is really important because, as it says here, this allows lakes and ponds to freeze from the top down and insulates the water below. Okay, so the low density of ice causes it to float on the surface of liquid water. So you can think of icebergs or ice cubes, but in a natural ecosystem, maybe an iceberg, or just when maybe a whole pond freezes over, but it freezes from the top down. right? So this ice actually creates an insulating barrier that protects the different animals and plant life that live in the water. It protects them from freezing. And without this, they couldn't survive. So that also makes water pretty awesome. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten what you need to out of this lecture, and tomorrow when you come to class, we will sort of touch on these and make sure everyone understands. And we'll have a quiz on this at the end of the week that we'll talk about tomorrow. So have a great night, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.